Plenty.
Hello and welcome to Garage Quest, a show about the game that garage rockers have loved since the 70s, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm your host, May McDonough, and this is my personal dungeon master, Rusty. And today, we thought we would talk a little bit about building characters based off of prominent figures in rock and roll. I think that you're probably thinking they're just going to all be bards, but you would be wrong. So let's talk about that.
I think a lot of people who've played role-playing games like D&D, I think, are pretty familiar with the idea of using things from the real world or works of fiction or whatever and bringing them into your fantasy world.
Usually movies.
Yeah, as a form of inspiration, either for, a setting or a plot line or even inspiration for a character.
For instance, my character in our game, Elementos, is almost entirely based on Sawyer from Lost.
Yeah, and it can add a subtle element to the game, as it did in this one, or it can be, pretty overt. Like, if you were to pick, very exaggerated personality traits of an iconic person, for example.
I actually thought the best place to start with this was a really classic legend, which is the legend of Robert Johnson, because he's already a musician who has a sort of fantastical legend about him. If you don't know Robert Johnson, the legend is that he went out into the crossroads, took his guitar with him at midnight, and a black man emerged. And
Why's it gotta be black?
Nevertheless, a black man arrived and took his guitar and tuned it and then played a little ditty, gave it back to him, and Robert Johnson supposedly sold his soul to the black man or the devil in order to be a great guitar player. And I thought that translates so incredibly well.
Oh yeah, that's like classic warlock.
Yeah. Become a warlock. You could put a little bard if you want a multi-class. You could bard it a little bit, but this is my thought. So make him a warlock, and then he has a pact with a fiend. So you have this this weird archdevil character. So it's more hellish in inspiration, and then it's slightly a manipulation of the rules, but my thought was they're allowed to have an arcane focus.
Yeah, so using his guitar instead of
exactly.
a crystal ball or a
have a
wand
lyre,
or something. Yeah,
and that's his arcane focus. So all his power still comes from this guitar, essentially.
Yeah, and I think he played an acoustic guitar too, so it wouldn't even be out of the setting, the fantasy setting, to have him play an acoustic guitar-like instrument.
Yeah.
They'd probably call it a lyre, but...
A lyre or a mandolin. Yeah. So then you don't really have to, we don't have to be literal about it. He doesn't have to be named Robert Johnson. But it's a great place to start for a character, right?
Yeah, there are all kinds of cool things. Like, for example, almost every spellcaster, has to perform some kind of somatic and verbal component, so hand gestures and making noise with their mouth. Well, what if they had a mouth harp, for example, like a reeded instrument, kind of like a harmonica, and instead of they're doing their hand signs and saying something, what if there was this special, way they gotta play the harmonica to cast their spell, So it
or
slightly
a
tweaks
song they have
it.
to sing. Like, you don't have to be a bard to incorporate
Exactly.
music as your way to cast spells.
Yeah, and in general, I think that concept that bards are musicians, I think is actually kind of one of the things that is wrong with their perception of that class, I think. Entertainer is actually one of the backgrounds that you can pick. Mm-hmm. So there's a way to add a bard-like element to your character without dedicating even a single level into that class.
Yeah.
You know, the acolyte, instead of being a religious acolyte, you could be coming from a tradition of protest, revolutionary type acolyte,
political.
Yeah, where you studied under some kind of a Che Guevara type figure and were religiously devoted to the punk rock ethos, you know?
Yeah.
And that is part, just kind of like modify that backstory, which really is about being a little bit fundamentalist or zealous,
and that is not at all uncommon amongst punk rockers to be a little bit of a zealot,
especially those of us who grew up during the SoCal hardcore phase. But
so did you come up with any ideas for musicians?
Oh, I've got a handful.
Cool. Okay.
I'm a big Captain Beefheart fan.
Yeah.
And I think that Don Van Vliet probably would make like a
fantastic character.
Yeah.
At least the Captain Beefheart is already a character.
Yeah.
I want to say, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like a drunken crazy poet man is a great place to start for something like that.
Yeah, I heard he did a lot more LSD than drinking or
really?
anything else, but okay, so my conception
Not that surprises
of Captain Beefheart, is that he's this wild creative genius that's obsessive and domineering and highly creative, but also absurd and surreal and insane.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought that doing a multi-class, well, first of all, Captain Beefheart, like Beefheart is a halfling surname if I ever heard one.
Absolutely.
Like
yeah.
Beefheart is definitely that is a halfling's last name for sure.
Yeah. So that people can go, damn you, Beefheart!
Something like that, yeah. And, he'd probably be a stout halfling, but the stout folk. Yeah. But anyway, I would multi-class with this halfling as a College of Lore bard, so I can get to use the cutting words and, a couple of cool spells that create madness, like Tasha's hideous laughter, etc.
Hard to role play.
I'm an advanced role playing gamer, so
that's true. We do focus very heavily on role play.
So another element that you might consider when building a Captain Beefheart character is maybe picking some of the short-term, long-term, or indefinite madness traits from the DM.
Madness lasts a certain amount of time, usually.
Well, it can, yeah, but this would be something that I might work out with the dungeon master, just like about just
he
adding.
He has a small amount of madness.
Yeah,
all the time. But, okay, for the sake of time, give me another character.
Okay, so definitely, if you really want to play with just using the little elements of like the mythical status that cultural figures have in real life as like seeds for character creation, I think it would be cool to play as Jello Biafra, but in the form of like this epic fantasy paladin, the Oath of Vengeance.
I like that
is basically 100% out to rid Faerun of tyranny, oppression of the underdog.
Highly aggressive character fueled by honor.
Yeah, in your face. Just,
purity.
Yeah, well, like a social justice paladin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Social justice paladin?
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
you know, I might make him a little bit less on the physical side, strength and constitution wise, and maybe focus
Sorry,
a little bit
Jell-O.
more on charisma and intelligence.
Yeah.
You know, and I even might consider the channel divinity called Abjure Enemy that comes from the Oath of Vengeance, instead of giving the opponents a frightening state, maybe give them a state where they don't comply with their last order. So if you can imagine Jello Biafra, you know, fighting off a legion of troops, you know, that are you know, under the banner of some you know, some corrupt nobility, you know, and he gives an inspiring, you know, call from his, you know, his freedom, you know, and anarchy god, you know, to these people, and instead of frightening them from Jello, he's actually inspiring them to question their.
He's a faith shaker.
Yeah, you know, so
I like that.
And you don't even have to change the mechanics of it. You can still treat the bad guys as frightened.
Sure.
You know, but it's not so much that they are afraid of Jello, but that the seed of doubt that they've planted, he's planted in their minds.
Yeah.
As you know, order taking soldiers. They've
been demotivated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
I like that. I like that a lot. What else you
got? Henry Rollins.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Okay. A punk rock barbarian, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, when he's not raging, he's just, like, a totally congenial, you know, skateboarding, surfing, like, totally friendly guy, you know?
Yeah.
But as soon as he, you know,
Turns,
trouble
flips that
arrives,
switch.
he, like, hulks down. He, like, downs a flag in a veil, smashes it against his forehead, starts chanting, you know, rah, 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 like, you know, and that's like part of his whole rage out as he slaughters his foes in a mosh pit like frenzy of blows.
So he literally, when he goes in a rage, he rages.
Yeah,
he straight up rages.
Yeah, straight up mosh
raging.
Yeah,
hardcore raging.
And then my last idea could interchangeably be Alice Cooper or Glenn Danzig.
Oh boy.
But imagine a necromancer.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm a big Misfits fan. Not that I'm not an Alice Cooper fan, but a lot of people don't know about Glenn Danzig. Is like Alice Cooper, he's a highly sophisticated, highly educated person.
Yeah.
With a
intellectual guised by like high concept.
Yeah. So I can kind of imagine, this totally buff necromancer wizard with the whole devil lock and everything, with a legion of animated dead and these like cult like followers with skulls painted on their face, and they're totally horrifying and terrifying on the battlefield, but actually when you get to know them, they're like a highly scholarly culture of people, and instead of ruling with an iron
Wayne's
fist.
World,
exactly,
with Alice Cooper, where he says Miliwake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the essence of it.
Right.
When you finally do meet this wizard warlord necromancer, Glenn Danzig or Alice Cooper, he ends up being like totally erudite and
diplomatic.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. There are a lot of figures in music where it's just they would translate so quickly, so obviously into fantasy, that they kind of lost its appeal to me, so I didn't bring it to the table. You have like Stevie Nicks.
Oh, as a witch.
Yeah, she's already like a druid or a sorcerer.
Yeah.
It's just, it would translate too easily, but I think in doing so, you lose Stevie Nicks completely, right?
Yeah, and
because she just already is pagan.
But that's kind of the thing, is like there's a whole spectrum of how you can approach this,
Yeah.
On one end, you can try to imagine your character as being like Stevie Nicks if she lived in Faerun.
Yeah.
Which
isn't that different.
Or you can imagine a person
It's
in
like Stevie Nicks with less cocaine.
yeah, because they don't have it. Though.
They don't have it. She would have to have something else.
Yeah, you'd have to go
Like
all the way.
dragon's snot, dried dragon snot,
Yeah, I hear that kicks like a mule.
like a unicorn.
I hear that kicks like a unicorn.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can think of yourself as being like using the figure like Stevie Nicks, for example, as your starting point in the fantasy world, or you can start with the exaggerated version of that figure and kind of create a fantasy character around that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And anywhere in between too.
Yeah.
You know, like it might be cool just to have characters that are like literally the medieval version of a contemporary or classic band. Like, could you imagine the Beatles as a traveling company of bards that they just played the tavern circuit in Faerun?
Well,
they weren't bards by epic fantasy standards. They're just musicians.
They're truly just bards, yeah. Like maybe in a low magic fantasy setting.
Or in any campaign setting, it could work.
We do have. I feel that this is the moment where I have to reveal that we did start a band in one of our campaigns. It was an anarcho folk band called
the Hex Crystals. Yeah. But the point is there are so many cool ways of taking these classic garage rock or rock and roll or punk rock icons and bringing them into your fantasy game.
So, that has been our second episode of Garage Quest. I thought it went well. Did you?
Also, we're supposed to do that thing where we tell people to like engage.
Yeah. So,
like if you need any help,
tippy-typey on the computery.
Yeah.
Can edit that out.
The doobly-doo.
Ask us questions, or if you have, better ideas than we do, I would absolutely love to hear more character build ideas based on rock and roll legends, particularly garage rock ones. So please.
Also,
comment.
I will be creating playable character sheets for the 4 characters that I came up with,
which will be put on the psychedeliccherry.com. All right, this has been Garage Quest, and thank you, Rusty, and I'm May McDonough. And please subscribe to the Psychedelic Cherry and comment below. Thanks.